capitalism. All of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do pass.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I know.
Really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy Strong's. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. All right, hello and welcome to Bread Theory. I'm your host, Zach, and joining me as usual is Dan Platt of the Albany Greens. How you doing tonight, Dan?
Hi, I'm good. Let me see if I can flip my camera, since I noticed.
Yeah, I've been having trouble doing that too. I think it's just something with Google Meets that
there does. Oh yeah,
the default is reverse image for some reason. So
video settings don't seem to be able to.
I don't know why that is. It's annoying.
Okay. Anyway, I'm wearing the National Green Party shirt.
It's looking right
how you
to
doing?
Me, so.
Nothing personally big to report, except that I probably actual bands don't usually play more than a few times a year in public, so that might be the way things go, which isn't as fast as I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But it probably means I can focus then on Green Party organizing over the summer, and try to get good list going so that when the fall hits, me and others are prepared to actually do some write-in campaigning for Jill Stein. As we have been, we're 3,000 signatures short of the 45,000 signature goal. And of course, they have to be valid signatures. So even if you do meet that minimum threshold, judges, they will be challenged by the Democratic Party. A judge will throw out enough of them, and you will not have ballot status. Interestingly, RFK Jr. in his campaign with its deep pockets did spend like about $1 million getting ballot access to New York. I don't know if they succeeded, but I think New York was trying to throw him off in a technicality because in the paperwork he put an address that was not in New York, or it wasn't a home address for him, when it needed to be like a campaign address or proxies. So, but he's suing, and then because of that, he is suing the state not because of the amount of the signatures like we usually do and ballot access overall, but just the petitioning process. That New York petitions are obtuse. There's so many ways you can fill it out wrong. So many signatures are deemed to be invalid because of these little details and fine print put on it. For example, you need to put your town name, right, not town or city. But if you put your village or the thing that's usually on your address,
right,
it would be wrong.
Oh man.
For example, here in Albany County, we have the town of Bethlehem, the town of Colony, but it has villages in between it. So you maybe put Delmar, which is where you live, but Delmar is a village within Bethlehem. So if you put Delmar, we have to cross it out and put Bethlehem, and that's cleaning and that's extra work. But even if that was the signature, it would be marked valid by a judge. It's that kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
And the street, and you can't put a PO box, which some people want to do. They do not want to put their home address, or maybe you can register at a PO box, but you're not allowed to put it as a signature. So it's that kind of rigmarole and bullshit. And that's just New York, of course. So anyway, that's the update on that side, and the band side. Library seems to be slow going. It goes at the speed of these kind of nonprofits where they don't have quorum. So I guess and they did a doodle poll for their meeting time. So the meeting is like tomorrow, but like they won't have quorum, or no, we don't want to bring candidates in yet. I'm like, wait, so I have to another month before I can even get started on anything? Like, no wonder things are like. But this is every almost every organization that isn't like have an office and someone delegated by a board to actually get things done. If
Right.
it's on the board itself, then it's volunteer work and it's always like when we have time and when people can show up and make time in their schedule. It's a big hassle. But these are the barriers to overcome, personally speaking, or on the individual level, to get out there and even just be social.
Sure.
Get off the internet, socialize, socialize, socialize. If you want to build socialism or even just a society, you can either socialize
Start
yourself.
with the social and
You can't just cut
socialism.
yourself off.
Absolutely.
Too many leftists I see online. They're
Yep.
pessimistic. They're jaded. They are defeatists. And it's because they hate people. They don't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And so they have no theory of how to deal with people. They're not socialized themselves. Um, and that's part of the lack of socialization is a lot of problems. It's a lot of the mental health. I think it's like you get some bad socialization from trauma or bad family, but then you don't get enough other socialization, and then you can't do it because you're so damaged or you got problems and you're not working well with others. It's a trap, of course. I don't have all the answers, but at least for those that are terminally online, or at least online more than they're not, it's sort of sometimes it's half and half where they're working hard, but then online they're just talking about how everyone sucks, and it's like they share those dumb memes where it's like the people who want to win and the people who want to do and nobody wants to do the work.
Mhm.
I'm like, well, you post online sure fixes that. We're all rallied or shamed to do more, I guess. That's gonna work. So anyway, to quote Talking Heads, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Why are we going to watch Defunct Lands, The War for Disney's America? Well, we were watching
Question.
the Second American War, an HBO movie from '97, and Ron Perlman, character,
Mhm.
had a line about like, oh yeah, I think the Alamo is blown up, and it's
Right.
like, what's next? They're gonna pave over Gettysburg battlefield, or worse, Disneyland.
Yeah.
And that joke's topical because all of this happened in 94 or 93, 94. So it's not prescient, it's not predicting anything. I think nothing in that movie was original in any way. Everything was some kind of reference to some other joke or concept or like thing that was going around at the time. It was a very 90s movie. So that's kind of why. So, but now we're going to learn, and this is pretty humorous. It's got all the other theme park, not just reviewers, but like essayists, because obviously there's a type of video essayist for every topic on YouTube, and theme parks and amusement parks are no exception. There are at least 10 good channels of people who do video essays or reviews of theme parks. Though it's a bit more expensive, they actually go or they actually do research, or they love theme parks, and that's why they make essays. So
Right.
some of them live in Orlando, and so they're always around. Others are, I don't know what kind of logistics are involved. It's
Yeah,
like
some
it's like
just have a
doing
lot
video essays on different cruise ships and
Sure.
cruises,
Yeah.
which I guess would be more like travel vlogs. So how are you doing, Zach?
I'm doing not too
Have a good
bad.
week?
Been doing
Are
landscaping.
you above the heat wave, or are you just north of the heat dome?
I mean, we get waves of it in and out. Like we'll have a real nice day in the 70s, and then today it was 90. So
I think it must
it's
have
been
gotten to
up and down.
90, but it was the high 80s here. But without the humidity, it's very bearable.
Yeah, it's very humid here too.
As long
It's
as
just
you're
been constant
like
humid.
in the you can be in the shade and it will actually be cooler.
Yeah. Right.
Or you actually be comfortable, because that 15-degree difference is a real thing.
It's a
Unlike
big
when the
difference.
humidity is
Yeah.
high and it's only maybe 5 degrees different. So the worst of the heat dome's over because the humidity broke after 5 thunderstorms over 5 days.
Whew.
2 of which were knocking down trees and power grids, including mine. I had an actual blackout for 2 hours on Saturday after a few blips as well. Very disconcerting. It's either out or it's not, but when it's intermittent, like it's going on and off, It's like, okay, this is
sucks.
pretty chaotic.
Yep.
And it's also a lot of trees. Like it was the first one. It was just so strong. It was hurricane force. It was um it knocked a lot of trees down.
Wow.
In the park, there were a whole branches torn off of half. Every other tree had a branch torn off. Um, Another one on my block, down the street, and all around the city. It was gnarly. Just a bellwether of things to come. And of course, the crisis is always 20 years away, or at least the deadline. And I did something morbid last week. I calculated what my personal effectiveness is as an adult activist. Like, how long do I think I have on this earth to be a participant in the struggle, the cause,
Yeah.
to be operating? Like, how long do I have to play my part, to throw my pebble in this river? If everyone else puts enough pebbles in, we build a dam.
Make a change. Yeah. There you go.
But we'll also need some mud too, so throw some mud down there too. But and some sticks. If the beavers can do it, so can we.
Absolutely.
And so I've said, like, okay, let's assume, be generous, I can make it to 85 and still be pretty effective. I come up with this number because my grandparents were able to still walk around and hobble around, and they're silent generation. So, and boomers are definitely going longer, or at least as long, though they still kind of deteriorate at some point. But they have more health issues, but that's also because they grew up with more toxic shit around them than we did.
Indeed. Yeah.
So we're not inhaling lead gas, the leaded air from the atmosphere anymore. So
that's critical.
After we were born. Yeah. So let's keep that in mind. So let's say we make it 85 and I'm still able to, help out. Nader can still do speeches. Noam Chomsky could be on his deathbed, I think, and he's been still doing lectures and stuff. So obviously there's and there's, of course, there's other academics. Franklin Wright was like 93 and he was still designing.
Sure.
Architects, famous ones, always live to their 90s and they're still drafting. It's funny. And they do their best work in those last 10 years.
Completely uninhibited.
Or in the last 10 years they experiment and they do something completely opposite of what their oeuvre is. So like Frank Lloyd Wright did round things. He did round things. And Corbusier, he had exposed brick.
What?
and arches.
Oh my goodness.
So anyway. So maybe Gary in his last 10 years will start making more conventional shaped nucarchitecture. Anyway. So that's 2073. That's the year where I'm like, that's when I feel I project that I won't be out of action.
Right.
And I'll have to be a spectator. I can read, but I won't be able to do much.
Won't be on the front lines anymore.
Yeah, it can't be the front lines. Gardening, maybe if I I can garden like this, but
I mean, definitely have gardening.
Which is it's a lot of years, but it can go by in a flash.
Certainly can.
That's the morbid part of it, where it's
Absolutely.
like, we're all dust in the wind, tears in the rain. But it's like you want to know what kind of life you want, or what kind of goals you have, and you can work back. You need to be able to work backwards. When we say we want socialism, it means this. How we work backwards from that. At the moment I'm reading, it's a novel, but it's more than that. Read plenty, and it's about like the Soviet utopian dream of the 1950s, and it's all about kind of like not working backwards, but just like trying to muddle and try to figure out how you actually build socialism with an economy that eventually is not going to be able to keep growing in double digits. Yeah. This is kind of what China's coming up against, and it's what the Soviet Union came up against in 1960. Because they could keep investing whatever money they wanted as a state capitalist enterprise, USSR Inc. but their investment money wasn't getting the kind of return on investment that American dollars were getting. They could keep investing, but a lot of it was kind of going to waste, or it wasn't efficient investment. Their growth wasn't matching the amount of investment being put in. I don't know if that's the author makes it clear he's not like writing a thing of history, but he's using historical context and characters to kind of, he calls it a fairy tale.
Mhm.
Fairy tale. So a plenty, and it's interesting. Kind of every chapter is a vignette, and it's interesting book. So let's get started though. Let's learn about
Definitely.
Disney's America
Disney's America.
in the style of the Ken Burns Civil War documentary,
Yeah.
which was also early '90s,
It's called
and the Gettysburg movie, which I have on tape, and I got a DVD of it, which is I love it.
Cool.
I love watching those Rebs get fucked up.
Yeah. Smash. Uh-huh.
There was no project during my first decade at Disney
Turn that up a bit.
about which I felt more passionate than Disney's America, and none that ran up against fiercer resistance. Michael Eisner, CEO and Chairman of the Walt Disney Company.
Walt Disney had many titles throughout his career. He was an artist, an innovator, an entrepreneur, a voice actor, and a television host. But the title that he was most proud seemed to be Patriot. Walt Disney's fascination and love for his country found its way into many of his films and projects. In his own words, Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America. Main Street USA and Frontierland were meant to capitalize on Walt's personal nostalgia for Americana, and he would attempt to implement more aspects of United States history throughout his theme parks. As early as 1956, 1 year after Disneyland opened, Disney had conceived an annex to Disneyland's Main Street USA called Liberty Street. This would have been a recreation of colonial Boston in the year 1775. Due to limited technology and the expensive 1959 Tomorrowland expansion, this never came to fruition. Around 1963, Disney would begin development on a
Black
second theme
Muslims
park
are
to be
assailed by
located in
parole
St. Louis,
officer.
Missouri, named Riverfront Square.
That's
This was
weird.
to include many elements from Disneyland with a
That's
greater
the
emphasis
headline.
on American history and culture. Disney would abandon this project after a series of issues with the city of St. Louis and to focus on his Florida project. Again tapping into his love of U.S. history, Disney developed an animatronic version of President Abraham Lincoln for the 1964 World's Fair. This technology and the original concept for Liberty Street would be combined to create Liberty Square at Walt Disney World, and its signature attraction, the Hall of Presidents. By the time Walt Disney passed away in 1966,
Also,
the company he
because
created had almost a
animatronics are cheaper than actors.
True.
You
Yeah.
don't have to pay them.
Don't got to pay them.
And that's the
especially if
main
they
reason
are
for
actual
developing
actors.
the
Yep.
wondrous technology of
Right, right.
animatronics.
Yeah. No, don't have to insure
They
them.
can do 12 shows a day.
That's right. Never
No
stop
pay.
for a break. Never break character.
synergetic relationship with America. The United States influenced Disney, and Disney influenced the United States. However, neither institution was without its issues. Both the United States of America and the Walt Disney Company could be considered empires in their own right. And 25 years later in 1991, both were on the move. The United States was sending its troops to Iraq, while the Walt Disney Company was invading Virginia.
There's those Davy Crockett hats.
Yep.
It was the summer of 1991. The Walt Disney Company's newest park, Euro Disneyland, was to open in France the following year, but it was behind schedule and over budget. Frustrated with the construction process, CEO and chairman of the company Michael Eisner spoke to the company's president, Frank Wells, about the potential for a smaller Disney theme park, one that would avoid many of the issues they had been facing with Euro Disney. Demand for the Disney brand was the highest it had been in decades since Eisner, Wells, and the president of Walt Disney Studios, Jeffrey Katzenberg, had saved the company
So that office building behind them where you see the seven dwarfs as columns, that's definitely an example. It's a clear example of postmodern architecture. Because the columns, of course, completely fictional, and they're fictional characters.
Oh, wow.
Basically, their main office building in Orlando or something is like a big pediment. It's modern. It's classical in form, but it's got the seven dwarfs as columns and other kind of Mickey ornamentation. So it's a postmodern building, and it was designed in 1980 or something.
Yeah, something that is purely form, no function at all.
From financial ruin, the brand was about to grow even stronger, with the release of Beauty and the Beast that winter, Aladdin in 1992, and The Lion King in 1994. At the suggestion of the head of Disney Parks, Dick Nunes, Eisner and Wells traveled to colonial Williamsburg. Nunes thought the area would be perfect for a smaller Disney theme park with an emphasis on American history. The idea had been at the forefront of everyone's thoughts, as early developments on an animated Pocahontas film had just begun. While Eisner and Wells liked the idea, it was clear that Williamsburg would not work for a location. The area did not have the tourists necessary to justify the investment, and it was 3 hours from the much more lucrative Washington, D.C. While not sold on Williamsburg, the idea alone had captured Eisner's attention.
Our visit did convince me that a park based on historical and patriotic themes could succeed, if we found the right place for it. Michael Eisner.
That idea turned into a plan, and that plan would turn into an invasion. Throughout the years, the reaction to the march of Disney's empire by locals had varied. They were mostly celebrated when they arrived in Orlando, and the people of Tokyo cheered them as they entered Japan. On the other hand, their invasion of France was met with strong opposition, and they had poor relations with the people of Anaheim. Through these experiences, the Walt Disney Company believed they knew how to properly execute an invasion. The first phase of their plan required complete secrecy. In the fall of 1992, Michael Eisner ordered the head of the Disney Design and Development Company, Peter Rummel, to scout locations for the park. He came back with the obvious answer: Washington, D.C.
It's no contest. It has a huge tourist population, and they're just the kind of people who would be interested in a historical theme park. Peter Rummel, president of Disney Design and Development Company.
A few months later, in January of 1993.
Just the kind of people who would want to be part of
the masses of rubes who just go to D.C. just to gawk at the monuments and.
You know, that's true. I hadn't considered that angle. I was thinking the people of D.C. But
no, not the people of D.C. The tourist.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes more sense.
People that go, they just walk around the mall and they feel inspired, I guess, and then they can go to Disney and feel even more inspired.
Yeah, they take the picture that makes them look like they're holding up the Washington Monument and.
Oh, people do that. Yeah, but it's straight though. So what? Are they leaning about it? Like they're pushing it, or
I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Or they got their fingers on it.
There you go.
Far away.
Yeah.
But the mall isn't really that long.
No.
I mean, it feels long. Sometimes when I'm there, well, I think the last time it was deep summer, so the grass was pretty shabby.
Yeah. Oh, it gets trampled to hell. That's for sure.
But the Smithsonian is very large and expansive and worth going through.
Yeah,
I actually didn't get through the African and Asian galleries, which are all underground.
Oh, interesting.
A good portion of the Smithsonian is underground. It's pretty cool. Air and Space was actually hit or miss for me.
Yeah. I think I saw that one. I'm not sure. I saw a bunch of stuff. It was a while ago. I was very young when I saw it.
But I can't say if you're ever, for anyone else who's in DC, the Portrait Gallery is wonderful.
Okay.
It's beautiful building. The interiors, it's like each kind of set. The building's broken up in the wings, and each wing has this different. The interiors have theming. Like one's Baroque, and all the paintings are Baroque, and everything fits, And then there's a postmodern like floor with modern art, and it's beautiful. It's like I was floored by how much was in there. And the building museum doesn't have a lot of exhibits, but it's in an old, really large insurance. It was an insurance company, but it's like a massive building with massive pillars inside, like the largest columns in the country.
Oh, really?
And but it needs more exhibits. It's
Okay.
it's a national building museum, and it basically only had like 3 galleries in it.
Uh-huh.
But it could have a lot more, like, I don't know, stuff for kids,
Sure.
but yeah, it was very odd how underfunded it was, I guess.
Wow. They should have tried to tap into that Disney money. Maybe they could have turned their fortune.
Eisner ordered Imagineer Bob Wise to lead the creative development of the park. At the same time, Rummel attempted to narrow the park's location and purchase the land. By the spring, a location had been found. Just outside of Haymarket, Virginia in Prince William County, the 3,000 acres of land was only 35 miles west of Washington, D.C. 2,300 of the
Only
3,000
35
acres were
miles.
owned by Exxon,
Yeah,
who had done
that's,
nothing
you
with
know,
the farmland since buying it
half
during
hour
a real
drive
estate
without
boom.
traffic.
Why
Disney
did
purchased an option to
Exxon
from
buy up
Exxon and
farmland?
began acquiring the remaining
That's a
500.
good question.
That's a bigger question right there. What was Exxon doing
Right?
buying farmland in Prince William County? Were they going to grow corn for ethanol?
That's good. That was my first thought, but like,
It was way before that, though.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Who
This is
knows?
before the merger with Mobile.
Who knows? Maybe they wanted a big campus out there at some future point.
Hmm.
Who knows?
100 to 600 acres of surrounding land, all done with the utmost secrecy. They had experience with this, as Disney had used shell companies to purchase the 30,000 acres of land in Orlando in the mid-60s. It was all a sneak attack, and as they would later learn, a fatal mistake. Around this time, Eisner hired Mark Pacala, who at the time was heading the development of the Disney Vacation Club, to be the general manager of the park, which had been given the name Disney's America. Imagineering had been working for months to create the concept for the park, and by late 1993, they had done just that. The park that the Imagineers envisioned had 9 lands, referred to as
No,
territories.
I think this part is cool because I love maps and I love concept art and
Sure.
and theme parks to some extent. Though of course they're never to my taste in the end. But especially now because they're all IPs, and the fact that this doesn't have any IPs in it, it's like, you know what?
The first land
I'd be okay with this if it was as is and if it stayed like that.
Yeah.
But the way commercial enterprise works is it doesn't, because like
No.
once something is new and attracts a certain amount of visitors, it has to like change and update, and those are the costs that make amusement parks apparently like this overly expensive endeavor,
Mm-hmm.
and they go out of business or they have bad years for various reasons. But it's just like they have to keep updating the rides. It's never just one investment. You have to keep investing
Gotta
in
keep
it.
them
You have
coming
to
back
keep
for more.
rebuilding the rides and things like
Yeah.
that, even though you probably didn't need to. Just I keep adding, or rather, because in my mind, it's like everything's like a roller coaster tycoon, where you just add more rides rather than and just focus on that rather than
Right.
redoing the rides you have. I'm like, why do they just keep rebuilding rides? Just add more.
Sure.
But
Rebuild.
sometimes it's just a matter of like they run out of land to expand to. But
That's true.
that doesn't make sense to me. Come on, you have the money to, you can't afford more land.
Fair enough. Yeah, let's see what we got here. Some of these seem pretty self-explanatory. President Square, Crossroads USA, even. But then we get into like
And they have they have like a time frame.
time frames. Enterprise, 1870 to 1930, and We the People, 1870 to 1930. Why is that We the People?
It's an Ellis Island replica.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Meant to be the immigrant experience. Well, maybe we should watch, and then they're not self-explanatory. Then
Yeah, that's true. Maybe not.
you can see Victory Field is the World Wars.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And State Fair.
Sure.
But then there's this also there's 2 more, which one is just Family Farm, because obviously that's like a really like fucking important part of American history, is just
There you
the
go.
family farm.
Yeah.
The yeoman farmer is the
Built on
building
a
block of all
agrarian
American fucking
that's
society.
right.
Stupid.
Uh,
Because there's certainly going to be exhibits there about the Populist Party, and farmers movements and the rent strike.
Yeah.
And Enterprise is gonna have union exhibits.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
A
The
lot
rise of
of
labor.
people's history is not going to be here, even
No.
though it's about the people.
Oh, you don't think they're going to do justice to Native America, which apparently only lasted 1600 to 1810?
Right, yeah. It's the smallest area.
The smallest area, yeah.
And overall, I think there's only 3 kind of thrill rides.
Uh-huh.
So there's like a dark ride coaster in Enterprise, a classic wooden coaster in State Fair,
I kind of like those wooden
and
coasters.
a river raft ride in Native America.
Okay.
And a lot of these concepts were ported over, and they'll mention it, to the California park.
Sure. State Fair didn't have more rides? Like, that's a huge part
Well,
of
it'd have
Minnesota
others
State
too,
Fair.
but
Yeah.
I mean action, right? Like coasters.
Yeah.
That's what I care about.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. You gotta have the speed, yeah.
But with what it's
And guess what
theming
entry would be?
and immersion, then you don't do that, and it needs to be dark rides. It needs to be like.
For sure. I get you.
And it gets more expensive.
Indeed it does.
Crossroads, USA. Set in the mid-1800s, this land, according to the park's promotional brochure, was to be a spirited portrait of mid-19th century commerce. Crossroads, USA is the hub of Disney's America, launching guests on an unforgettable journey through the vivid tapestry of American history. A train trestle marked the entrance to the land, with 2 antique steam trains traveling the park's perimeter. River transportation would have also been available from this area, likely taking guests toward the Enterprise territory. This area, set during the Industrial Revolution, was described as a factory town showcasing inventions and innovations spawned by the integrity and can-do spirit that catapulted America to the forefront of the industry. Attractions would have included a part roller coaster, part museum called the Industrial Revolution, which would twist and turn guests through the history of industry and even get them up close to a dangerous...
What'd you say?
Can do.
Can do.
Never mind.
I'm not catching the reference.
In Rick and Morty, there's the Meeseeks.
Oh,
they
okay. That's what
exist. They do a task. They don't exist.
Can do. Yeah. I remember
Can do. Okay.
that. Gotcha. I wonder what this coaster is supposed to be on. Are they like going through?
Rails. It's on rails.
Yeah. No, it's on rails. I'm just like, are they touring a factory through this? Is this like a recreation of Upton Sinclair's?
I think like this would be like a half corkscrew or a twist.
Yeah.
And there's this, there would be heaters that make it really hot in there, and then there'll be like
maybe it's a foundry. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's meant to be a foundry.
Gotcha.
Steelworks.
dangerous vat of molten metal. There would also be another ride or walkthrough
Same way that
exhibit
the
focusing on the
Desperado
creation of
plunge in the Great Escape, my regional amusement park, Six Flags one, is a log flume ride, and there's like a pretty substantial, like minute-long stretch before the big drop where you're kind of going through a sawmill, and there's all this sawmill stuff. It goes, to kind of build some tension. You got like a desperado on a log, and he's spinning. Whoa!
Yeah.
It's fun. And then you go down the plunge.
Sounds like our
Usually is an open one on here, but I'm not there that often.
yeah.
I last went in Halloween time, so they wouldn't have the water rides on.
Gotcha. Yeah, it sounds like one of the first rides at Mall of America, which was Paul Bunyan's log flume, and you go on this little tour of,
Oh yes, of course.
wood cutting.
I mean,
country.
always go to a Six Flags in early October. It's early for the Halloween stuff, so if you don't care about that, but all the line, like you'll be able to go on everything 3 times.
Nice. Okay. Good tip. Yeah, I suppose.
But I went with
most
my
of the kids
little
are in school
nieces, so
still, yeah.
I had to kind of watch them and do things with them, and do the kiddie rides with them.
Yeah.
But they had added a substantial amount of kiddie rides from the last time I was there.
Oh, nice.
Because they've removed quite a lot too. But they also add some other things. Like again, they don't keep adding new coasters. They just replace old ones. In the case we had probably the last remaining bobsled coaster, where the cars are not actually on a track at all. It's actually in a fucking bobsled, so it's possible for it to go on its side, which
What,
happened
really?
a few times. or like it would not have enough momentum and it would like not get over the last hump or something. Like
No.
something would go wrong constantly with this thing. So so it was finally taken apart and I got to see the wreckage of it. But I think they were gonna put in another wooden coaster, which is exciting.
Nice. All right.
Products or the evolution of manufacturing, and an attraction called Industry Today, where guests can navigate remote-controlled shipping vessels on a small lagoon. Next to the town of Enterprise would be an area called We the People, set in the same era. The park's brochure read, framed by a building resembling Ellis Island, We the People recognizes the courage and triumph of our immigrant heritage, from the earliest native settlers to the latest political refugees. This would have included a replication of New York City's Ellis Island building, which would house a show that would explain the immigrant experience in the early 20th century and the impact it had on the United States. This area would also serve as a mini
Not too
world
many
showcase,
immigrants.
with a variety of
Yeah,
eateries
right.
and music from
But
different
no, we
cultures
like
that
immigrants.
immigrated to the
Cheap
U.S.
labor that
Set in the
helps Disney
1930s and
Empire grow.
Yeah, it's always the paradox of America. Love their labor, just don't like the people having to stick around.
40s, the park's fourth territory would be Victory Field. Themed after an
Depends on what
aircraft
class
hangar and
you're in,
landing
Zach.
strip, Victory Field would have allowed guests to parachute from a plane or operate tanks and weapons in combat, and experience firsthand what America's
doubt
soldiers
that.
have faced in defense of freedom. The main attractions of Victory Field would be motion simulators or virtual reality attractions, simulating flying World War II planes and tanks. This area would have also been a stop for the park's railroad. Next
The thing
was
about
State Fair,
attractions like
also
that
set during
is
the
they age like raw milk.
Yeah.
As Disney Quest will be mentioned towards the end, and I went to Disney Quest in Orlando,
Disney Quest.
and it was new, and it was quite the experience. I loved it, but also like did not need to ever do it again. And the tech had already become redundant or out of date by 2000
Yeah.
or 2002 or whatever year. And the idea is that I guess like an arcade, you just keep getting new machines or something like that. But it was just such a big investment, it would just not make its money back, or was by the time it made its money back, you wouldn't make a profit because you'd have to replace all the machines to bring in any repeat customers or any new ones with that disposable income, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, Disney Quest was a lot of VR stuff,
Okay.
VR games and stuff,
Your game.
which
Okay.
my 11-year-old brain loved, because the most advanced video game I'd played was Perfect Dark, I guess.
Okay. Perfect Dark.
At the
Wow.
time.
I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yeah, this is 98, 99,
Sure,
whatever
sure.
year it was. Or wait, it was 11. Yeah, 99.
Yeah, you're right. That stuff does age pretty quickly. Although there always is that kickback of nostalgia that comes around eventually, where like there's an arcade near me that has all the classic stuff, the Pac-Mans and the Space Invaders, all that.
Oh,
sort of
sure,
thing.
yeah, barcades
So-
are always are good, though they can be done poorly. I went to one in Buffalo, and here's my review. The food was okay.
Mhm.
It was more restaurant than barcade. So there was arcade stuff on the second level, but there was still also large tables. So like there wasn't actually that much room between the cabinets and these
Wow.
middle tables that people could be sitting at. I don't think they were at the time. It was a slow night, but they could have been there, and even
Yeah,
empty.
packed,
The
yeah.
chairs were kind of in the way,
Sure.
and it would have been like, where are the waitresses got to like bring food around?
How was their circulation? Yeah.
And yeah, the circulation was horrible. The games were, I think, they were too expensive. I think they were 50 cents, maybe more. They certainly weren't $1. I would have played even less, but I didn't play that much because they weren't a quarter. They should just be a quarter, but they were also set to like a hard difficulty, because you can turn the knob on arcade machines and make them harder, where you have less health, or
Sure.
it's set up to hard, so like more enemies are coming at you like right away. So unless you memorize everything and you play 50 times, like you're just gonna have at most a minute of play. at most. I don't think I was even getting that much. So I'm like, this is not a good value. If it was a quarter for play and I was getting at least like a minute or two, you want at least 2 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
A few. And if you're good, if you feel like you should be doing well, then you should get 5 minutes. But like the idea is, I suppose, if they were busy, you'd want a lot of circulation, so you don't want anyone playing too long. But it's like, fuck you. You should have more machines. There weren't there were a good amount, but not a lot. They had the Simpsons arcade game.
Oh, that's a classic.
In fucking forever. But again, it was too hard. It was like I was losing too fast. And it was not because I suck at games, okay? It's because you only can get hit 3 times.
Sure. There's a place near me that just charges a cover charge, and then you get to play all the games for free. And
that's a better.
And then it gets mogged by people, but surprisingly,
sure. What's the charge? Is it 20? Is it 30?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. I think 20, something like that.
20 is about right. Because let's say you spend an hour playing the games.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
And is it just a bar, or was it a restaurant?
Oh, I mean, they have like an art mini golf course where each hole is designed by a different artist.
Oh, okay, so it's a funplex.
Yeah. It's called Can Wonderland, and they got all.
This is
they
a
got,
suburban
shows.
style place.
It's in the city of St. Paul.
Okay.
But it's in an old warehouse. Like they converted the whole basement of a warehouse into this thing.
So yeah, funplex warehouse.
Yeah.
Did you mention this to me before?
I may have.
We've talked about arcades.
Yeah.
We probably have. The one that's like perfect for me was just called Barcade, and it was in the neighborhood around Cooper Union in Manhattan. What's the neighborhood called? Starts with Saint something. Because it's after one of the streets. Because it's one of like this great shopping street with a lot of hipster / goth stuff. They had a lot of goth shops on this one place. St. James. St. James Place. St. James Place.
Cool. All right, well, let's get back to the video.
1930s and 40s. According to the brochure, State Fair celebrates small-town America at play with a nostalgic recreation of such popular rides as a 60-foot Ferris wheel and a classic wooden roller coaster, as well as a tribute to the country's favorite pastime, baseball. Amid a backdrop of rolling cornfields, fans may have a hot dog and take a seat in an authentic, old-fashioned ballpark and watch America's legendary greats gather for an exhibition all-star competition set in the same.
How much what?
Corn. Maybe it would be fake corn, because I mean, if they had real corn growing, like
they'd have
to harvest it eventually,
right?
Or like, how would they maintain the?
I suppose they just flatten the whole thing at the end of the year and just plant it again next year. Yeah.
Nah.
You don't actually have to harvest.
No, it has to be as high as the baseball players,
so they can emerge from the field of dreams. Yes. Yeah.
Era as Victory Field and State Fair, the park's 6th territory was Family Farm. The description read, offering a cornucopia of pastoral delights and insight into their production, Family Farm pays homage to the working farm, the heart of early American.
Now, of all the ones we've seen, this one just doesn't make sense to me. Because maybe it wasn't a thing at the time, but certainly today, there's so many farms you can just go tour and like see that only an actual working farm.
Well, that is a new development.
Yeah,
I
I guess so.
This is how the family farms that have survived, but it's also not only always a family farm, but it's new people who bought a farm because they come from wealth.
Yeah,
and then they set up like a revenue stream of barns to host weddings,
sure,
and tours of facilities, or like
all that stuff.
I mean, we've always had Indian Ladder Farms, which is an apple orchard place, and they make a lot of cider, and then the apple cider donuts, and of course they're always great. As a kid, we'd have apple picking like almost every year. Sometimes it was a school trip, and sometimes it was just something we did as a fam, because you get to keep all that bags of apples, you know. But anyway, yeah, like a lot of farmers are like, we need another revenue stream because prices aren't good enough for our wares, and the market sucks, and we're always fighting off the big agro,
sure,
which is just completely dominant. But it's like, yeah, it's nostalgic. It's the nostalgia. I mean, this is the small family farm
I guess.
is a historical artifact
That is true.
as far as this park is and the concept is concerned. And it's, can anyone see this and be helped but just be sad? And it seems like the state fair is also sort of farming and exhibition. So it's sort of like you have two areas devoted to farming, but the people going to DC and to tourist attractions, they are, I guess. Well, no, not true. They're suburbanites, so they're people not from farm, not from
Yeah.
farm, right? And they're not from, well, they could be from cities, but not always. But yeah, now you
Yeah,
have all those
I guess
options
so.
if you're in an area that isn't a complete like hellscape.
True.
But we definitely need more farms back in our county again.
Oh yeah.
There used to be every type of food produced, but and that was as late as 1940,
Mm-hmm.
the 1950s. We had like pig farms and stuff. But yep, car development ruined all of that.
Oh, absolutely. Drove all the suburbs further and further out and took up all that prime farmland pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Families. This area would have featured farm exhibits such as animal handling and food productions, a country wedding, barn dance and food buffet, and a stop for the park's railroad.
Old country
The Civil
buffet.
War fort,
Old
set
country
between
buffet.
1850 and 1870, was described as emblematic of our nation's greatest crisis. The Civil War fort allows guests to experience the reality of a soldier's daily life. This would have included a Circle Vision 360 film that would have put guests in the middle of Civil War battles, outdoor reenactments, and the perfect view of Freedom Bay, the park's main body of water that would be home to a nightly reenactment battle between the Monitor and the Merrimack.
Oh,
This
wow.
would serve as the park's nightly fireworks show. Harkening back to Disneyland's Indian Village, Disney's America would feature a territory called Native America. Set between 1600 and 1810, Native America explores the life of America's first inhabitants, their accord with the environment, and the timeless works
just
of art
one
they created
Padawan
long
village.
before European
'Cause, you know,
colonization. This area would have
Pocahontas.
included
Yeah, I'm sure.
And this is supposed to be all Native American.
It represents all of Native America. This is the depth and breadth of it. Yeah.
Well, see, at Disneyland, in Frontierland, you had a Native American village, and you had First Nation people doing cultural exhibitions there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were usually, you know, Apache, Lakota Sioux, Western tribes.
Yeah.
And I guess this would have more Eastern or just Virginia. Thus the Padawan.
The people whose land we took this from. They can
Yeah,
come back
yeah,
and reenact
actually.
their old
Well,
culture. Yeah.
included a recreation of an Indian village and a river raft ride called
and
the
you
Lewis
don't need a
Clark River
colonial
Expedition,
area
which
because you have colonial Williamsburg in the same state. I think that's probably the logic. Because otherwise you don't have a colonial area.
That's true.
And though Enterprise kind of fills in the industrialization, it's like
It's not
it
quite the
feels
same.
like in American history stops at what in 1950, yeah, with the World
Yeah.
War, but because that's when modern history, American hegemony begins.
Right. American
It's all just the
hegemony.
lead up to it, but like we don't really want to dwell too much on before America was even a thing, or powerful, or like great.
Yeah, what was that?
Because when did America start being great?
Uh,
1830s, 40s, maybe. No. Calling the Civil War our greatest crisis is also sort of a
I mean,
doesn't feel that right with me.
no. I mean, we actually had states leaving the Union. I don't think we've had.
Yeah, I suppose. If that's what you want to define America as,
I guess.
just did some state, the United States, yeah. And that's when, yeah, I know that changed in language. The United States versus the United States, or yeah, something like that. It became a proper noun, United States.
Sure.
But you think the revolution would sort of maybe like play a part, but
Right, yeah, the Revolution.
President Square is
conspicuously
meant to represent that,
advancing.
but it's like it's just an amphitheater in like a different version of the Hall of Presidents.
Right, yeah, it seems pretty scaled down compared to these other.
Or another,
ones,
or just another Hall of Presidents.
for sure.
Spawned from an original idea from the aforementioned never-built Riverfront Square Park. Finally, President Square, set between 1750 and 1800, was the park's final land. From the struggle of the colonists and the War of Independence to the formation of the United States and its government, President Square celebrates the birth of democracy and the patriots who fought to preserve it. The
looks
attractions
like a
would have
park,
been a
though.
successor, clone, or relocation of the Magic Kingdom's Hall of Presidents, and a large outdoor amphitheater for shows and performances. Outside of the theme park, Disney also wanted to set up television space to broadcast presidential debates and other events. Of course, Disney wanted guests to be able to stay on property, and there was space allotted for hotels near the entrance, as well as deluxe suites scattered throughout the park, where guests could actually stay within Disney's
I had
America
a Trump
overnight.
at Disney
In
Studios.
total,
at
there would be 2,000.
Disney's America.
Yeah.
Picture it now. Not at university.
1,281 houses, 1,340 hotel rooms, a campsite, a shopping district, and 2 golf courses. The park itself also left a large amount of green space, especially surrounding Freedom Bay. Disney's America was ambitious in its theming, but reserved in its budget. The resort would be completed for just $650 million, around half of Euro Disney's original construction budget. It would only take about 10% of the 3,000 acres Disney had acquired, with plenty of room for expansion should the resort be successful. Research showed that Disney could pull from Washington, D.C.'s 13 million domestic tourists, and the company expected to see 30,000 guests a day during peak season. The park would have to close for 2 or 3 months during the winter, so Disney expected around 5 to 6 million guests per year. Their calculations projected that $48 million would be added to Virginia's economy as a direct result of the park, and 19,000 jobs would be created in the park and surrounding area. Disney's America was slated to open in 1998, and Eisner had become invested in the park's development, making it his main focus and newest pet project. While Disney was coming to grips with the massive failure of Euro Disneyland, they were still comfortable with moving forward on Disney's America. They did not foresee the war that their invasion would bring. In early November 1993, Eisner called Virginia Governor-elect George Allen to brief him on the plans for the park. By pure coincidence, Allen was at Walt Disney World at the time, and after hearing the plans for Disney's America, he gave a resounding yes. Disney had found their greatest ally in the governor, whose first term started that January. The media had been catching on to Disney's plans over the course of a few months, but the call to Allen opened the floodgates. Disney announced their plans for the park on November 11, 1993, with a presentation by Wise describing the park in detail. Disney, already worried about negative reaction to a park dedicated to history, ensured the public that they would not be giving the fairy tale version of the American story. They might have overcorrected a bit by explaining that they would have painful, disturbing, and agonizing slavery exhibits and attractions that captured the horrors
Well,
of
that
war.
was interesting.
We want to make you a Civil War soldier. We want to make you feel what it was like to be a slave, or what it was like to escape through the Underground Railroad. Bob Weiss, Imagineer.
It's definitely a
In
misreading
hindsight,
on
this
what
was
like
the wrong thing.
we want to immerse people, but they're still there to be entertained and have fun. Which is where like
probably not so much.
immersion is actually to me a terrible goal for any entertainment venue.
Yeah, kind of straying
Like
into
so much effort is put
traumatizing.
into immersion and tricking me or any other consumer into believing where they are it's changed or something like that. But
yeah.
that's a lot of like suspension of disbelief, right?
Mhm.
That like I walk in, it's like I don't know, you can have a certain amount of fun with it and it works when you're a kid. Like kids can be immersed
Sure.
because the difference between what's real and not real can be blurred.
Yeah.
But after 13, like that's why I became really jaded and hated everything Disney after being 16 on. And now of course I don't really want to ever go back again to any Disney park. When I go, I want to do a tour of like, real amusement parks who don't care about immersing me. Though they'll still have a lot of IP theming if it's Six Flags because they just want to run DC into the ground. But but I don't go to fucking Six Flags for DC theming. I don't get what the DC theming is for. I don't even think it engages kids that much. I guess it
Nah.
could, but like, I don't know. but it's for kids, or the kid at heart, right? But I don't know. I want to be intellectually stimulated, and that's what museums do. So when I go on vacation, I'm going to a place with museums.
Sure.
As I was mentioning about DC, I went to the museums.
Right. Yeah.
And this is supposed to be like a immersive live action museum.
Sure. Stepping back into history. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I feel like if you have again, my concept for a theme park, a history theme park, would be like a Renaissance fair, but different eras, but do it like a Renaissance fair where it's fun and silly and not really historical.
That makes
But
sense.
it's themed like it.
Yeah.
It's fake history,
Right.
which is what most people's conception of history is.
Well, of course.
Unfortunately, I came across a Rosencrantz video is the channel name, and he was kind of going through pop history and its consequences, and sort of he's used a very good example of something. Again, it's like if you want to be annoying at a party, here's some trivia for you. But Louis XVI's quote, "I am the state," is used as a stand-in to teach the age of absolutism. But absolutism is actually the wrong way of teaching or learning about that era of history, European history, because it's about state consolidation and nation building. And that's when monarchies start becoming less relevant. And because that quote, "I am the state," is not actually fungible. It's just a bunch of people writing about Louis XVI, but there's never any direct source that he actually said it. What there is direct evidence for is him saying the exact opposite. A quote, "After me, I may die, but the state will remain." Which means the opposite of "I am the
Which means
state."
that he's not the state.
It means
He
that
is just
even
director
as
of
the
state.
Bourbon, like France is no longer the Bourbon dynasty presents France. It's France,
Right.
the modern nation state that teaches everyone Parisian French, no matter where you live, even New Caledonia. There's riots right now, or another set of them, and so on. So it's that's a good example. You know, a lot of historical quotes are just bullshit. Like but it doesn't matter. You know, it's the feeling they convey, right? But the feeling can also be inaccurate. It's like, actually, that's not really what was happening in the 17th century. Monarchs were actually becoming less absolute. It was because the state was becoming bigger and more important.
Sure.
And there was, it's doing capitalism.
The capital,
Okay.
Right, yep.
Let's continue. The invasion.
The invasion.
To say. Now that the park had gone public, Disney began flanking every side of development, hiring lobbyists for the local, state, and even federal governments in an attempt to acquire permits and exceptions necessary to build the park. They began to court local and state officials, knowing that they would need to alter zoning ordinances, and most importantly, widen Interstate 66 that guests would use to get to the property. Prince William County, especially the people of Haymarket, were excited at the park's announcement. Haymarket had been hit hard by recession in the early 90s and were hopeful that the park would help them recover. Disney set up an office in the town and made a donation of $1,000 to the town's Lafayette Day celebration. The company also imposed restrictions on themselves, ensuring the people of Prince William County that they would expand the wooded area surrounding the park, restrict the height of the planned buildings and attractions, and ban diesel engines to avoid air pollution. The town's papers rejoiced with headlines reading "Zippity Doodah," and local businesses created signs saying "We love Mickey." The opposition was not strong immediately. A few expressed concerns over the park's sprawl and the effects that it might have on the Manassas battlefield, which was less than 5 miles from the proposed site. The First Battle of Manassas, also referred to as the First Battle of Bull Run, was the first major battle of the Civil War. The Second Battle of Manassas on the same ground was of an even larger scale, and another significant victory for the Confederacy. In the early 90s, the federal government had stopped the development of a shopping mall near the battlefield by purchasing the land directly surrounding it. It was a controversial and expensive move, all done for the purpose of preserving the area's history. In the early 1990s, public interest for Civil War history was high thanks to Ken Burns' hit documentary miniseries, Civil War. The series was incredibly popular, and it turned many professors and historians into recognizable figures. David McCullough, the show's narrator, was now a familiar voice to millions, and he just so happened to be one of the first to raise that voice against Disney's invasion of Virginia.
It is a commercial blitzkrieg by the Panzer Division of Developers. David McCullough, author and historian.
Disney's surprise attack, which at first seemed to have been a
see a
successful
lot of
mission,
political
had
cartoons in
significant
this.
drawbacks.
Nice.
For one, they lost valuable time that they could have spent building
Low-hanging
relationships
fruit.
with the community and lawmakers. The whiplash from the announcement was too severe to do this effectively afterwards. They could have also spent time recruiting historians before the plan for the park was announced, which would have reduced opposition from the academic community. Another mistake was that when they did finally reveal their intentions for the park, Imagineering revealed far too much, giving the opposition ammunition to use against Disney's America in the media. The headlines for Disney
Now in
taking on
PR,
the issue of
you wanna say
slavery
as
wrote
little as
themselves
possible.
and set the park back. While Disney was surprised by the opposition they had received so far,
It's sort of a
their
lose-lose,
morale was
right?
not broken.
Yeah, you put your cards on the table and you're
Right.
forthright about what you want to do, but then you're giving your opposition
And
ammo,
use it
right?
against you.
And if you pulled back and be secretive and be like, well, we don't want to reveal because, you can't attack us with what we don't say, but then you can be attacked for withholding and being
Yeah.
secretive.
Like,
and,
what are they
hey,
not telling us? Why are they?
Yeah, it's a
withholding?
conspiracy.
Right.
So yeah, we're choosing the former battle, I guess, as communists to say this is what we want to do. But again, it's based on your audience, and Disney being the multinational corporation it is, can't really pick its audience. Its audience is everybody, right?
True.
You can't pick and choose.
True.
They could try like the one audience is the locals, and they can
I can
buy
try
them
to
off
keep a
with
lid
some
on
good,
it. Yep.
donations and promises they're totally not going to keep, and or unintentionally can't keep.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, it's out of our hands. Market demands and commercialism.
I mean, I'm sure it would have produced a fair number of jobs, but whether or not they would be decent jobs by any measure is another debate.
Especially when a county's economy is like, oh, we've been hit hard by the '92 recession,
Right.
and we need a comeback plan.
Yeah. Like,
It's so fucking small potatoes,
$6
like
an hour
like the
to
whole
dress up.
the reactionary tendency. It's just on my mind of, because of both listening to people talk about the underclass, Black revolutionaries, and then watching a reaction to the Return of the Dark Knight, which is a very reactionary piece of media, to completely ignore the causes of crime and just completely ignore that American manufacturing is declining since 1972, and no politician or authority can do anything about it because the American economy has shifted to financial capital, which is what it does when it reaches the limit of material capital expansion. It's just a natural stage that actually occurs over and over and over again every century with whatever power. It's kind of interesting that some economists, Marxists or otherwise, will consider our shift to financialization to be this new thing, but every other major power has gone through the same cycle. Venice, Genoa, the Dutch, England, anyway. Time scale just changes. And of course, there's no promise to make. You can't promise more jobs.
No.
But you can promise more prisons and sentencing and coming down on the symptoms of a wider economic change, which is basically out of the hands of. It shouldn't be out of the hands of the state. There's a dialectic between the state, capital, markets, and whatever. But I'm getting back into reading the rest of the long 20th century, which I gabbed about months ago.
Okay.
Because I read half of it. I'm going to read the other half, because if I'm going to talk about it and use it as my new worldview, I really want it to be. I feel like it's my new worldview now, because it's that see the things in that big scale of capitalist development, and everything's part of it, or everything else is noise. The signal versus the noise.
Sure.
Okay, let's get back to Disney. Run out of time.
Broken, and they began recruiting a few historians of their own. Eric Foner, historian and professor at Columbia University, who had been working with Disney on the 1993 retooling of the Hall of Presidents, was asked to join the project. He agreed. James Horton, a historian and professor of African American history at George Washington University, was also asked to consult on the park. He was skeptical of Disney's ability to deliver on their concept, but he felt that he had an obligation to help.
It seems unfair to me to say to Disney, "This is terrible. You're doing this wrong." Then refuse them when they say, "Will you help us do it right?" We need to try to make sure that they do it as well as we can.
Well, not doing
push
it
them
wrong,
to
just
do
they
it.
shouldn't do it.
James Oliver Horton,
So
historian
you're sort of
and
having
professor.
a like, well, if I don't help them, no one will, or if I don't help them, someone else will, and they'll be worse.
Right.
It's sort of like that compatibilist, not compatibilist.
Oh, is that what that's called? Where you,
What's the other C word when you're a trader? Collaborationist. Collaborationist.
sure.
logic.
so yeah, you can't hold back the tide of change,
Of
but at
Disney.
least you can be part
Disney's
of.
gonna win anyway.
You can help guide it a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that the idea?
I can sort of respect it.
Sure.
But you'll see the rest of the historian community is
Does not agree.
a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah. A little more based.
Nice.
With only days left in Virginia's General Assembly session, Disney and Governor Allen demanded that a $163 million incentive package be passed through the state legislature. This included $131.5 million in road improvement bonds. The spending would result in the widening of the congested interstate near the park.
Disney
Only
could build
$49
in
million
Virginia, but
of
they
the
need
project would fall on
incentives.
Disney, which would be
They need a $160 million incentive package, which is a seventh of the cost of the whole park. If like it was 700
That's
million.
just so
what's the price
ridiculous.
tag?
I mean, it's 30 miles. Build
A train,
a train. Yeah, right?
or have a dedicated bus line.
Something that's
Different
mass
buses.
transit. Like,
Well, but again, it's not just from DC, right? People are going to be driving all around the region and the whole Beltway.
right, but they were saying their main tourist bases would be coming out of DC, so at least that's going to cut down on the need for road
good point.
infrastructure.
But look, it's not the way they're going to be thinking. They're thinking in terms
know.
of cars. People come by car
It's stupid.
because people are driving to DC, so obviously they can just drive.
I mean,
beyond it.
this is like a one-day park, right? Like, you're going to see everything in a day. So you park your car at the Disney's Park and Ride. You
Zach,
shuttle in.
Zach,
What?
you haven't taken kids to a theme park, have you?
No, I've never taken my kids to a theme park, no. Except, well, I suppose Mall of America, but that,
One day is never enough. With little kids who get distracted, as well as they should be distracted and find everything fascinating. It will, and to do everything in a park, it will take more than one day. Legoland in New York, I would not consider to be a big park. I would not consider it to be an extensive park. All the rides, there are not a lot of big rides. There's not a lot of the lines were kind of long because they're understaffed, but otherwise the lines weren't that long physically.
sure.
Though some waits were like half an hour. But to do everything in that park, it took 2 full days.
Okay. Fair enough.
Though of course there's taking out the time it took to drive there, but again for us it's just an hour and a half or 2. So getting there at 10 and whatever. But regardless. And with little kids, you're gonna have a late start and have a breakfast. And
Sure, you guys
what do
pause
we
for
even do
snacks
for
and
breakfast
meals
that day
and-
anyway?
Yeah,
Can't remember.
fair enough. Still, there's some way they could work around it. Have an overnight rate that's cheap.
Yeah.
They
They want people to stay on the park grounds, right?
Okay. Well, I mean, if you got your car, then you don't have to stay there. You could just leave whenever you want. If you're on
Well,
a
and
train
therein
schedule.
lies that like Disney says, okay, we want people on the property and have a self-contained little world, but that's not the way development really happens.
Mhm.
It's not what happened in Anaheim.
Yeah.
It's definitely like Orlando was supposed to be its own self-contained world. That's why they got 30,000 acres.
Right.
But there is still other companies building their theme parks adjacent that then take away visitors to the point where my brother is planning a vacation where they're just going to do the Universal stuff and they're not going to touch
Definitely-
Disney at all.
It's definitely the better parks, I gotta say. But
I agree. Their
Although-
IPs are somehow more classic, maybe because they're movie based.
I haven't seen the new Star Wars. What is it?
Yeah, Devil's
Galaxy's Edge, whatever the hell it's called.
Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, so that looks pretty cool. But
yeah, my brother loved it. And again, he said, "Oh, I could spend all day there," and we only, went through a few hours. He impresses easy. Don't watch this, Lou.
all right, well, let's try and finish this up because we still got.
Be paid by
Little ways
sales
to go.
tax of at least $3.8 million annually. If the park did not produce that amount of tax in any given year, Disney would have to pay the difference. Still, the majority of the burden was placed on the taxpayers of Virginia, which concerned many of the legislators. Governor Allen reminded them that with or without Disney, I-66 would need to be improved. The traffic during rush hours was causing the highway to become dangerous. Many believed that the Disney park would only exacerbate
One
these
more
issues,
lane,
but
Zach.
Allen pointed out that the
Just
tourists
one
would
needs
be
another
coming in the early
lane.
morning and leaving in
And
the
the
late
congestion
night,
problem
avoiding the
will
work
be
rush.
alleviated.
The legislature was
Yeah.
still skeptical. Now mid-March,
Fuck
opposition to the park had become more prevalent in the months since the park was announced. Passionate editorials were being written in opposition to the park in papers across the country. Demonstrators were showing up to events and development meetings, and more prominent historians were voicing their opinions on the project. Uninterested in their concerns, Disney threatened to pull the project out of Virginia if the incentives package was not approved immediately. The legislature granted the bonds, having little choice and no time for deliberation. Another win for the Walt Disney Company, but it did not help the public's skepticism toward the project. Around this time, Eisner and Wells were able to restructure Euro Disney's finances, providing a sliver of hope to the desperate resort. Less than a month later, on April 3, 1994, Frank Wells was killed in a helicopter crash at the age of 62. Wells had been integral to the company's success. He often took care of important deals and was a master of
seems to
public
be the
relations.
most,
During their partnership, Eisner was able to get
frequent
attached.
cause of death for millionaires.
What was that?
A frequent or likely cause of death for millionaires seem to be plane and helicopter crashes.
Yeah, funny about that.
They seem to
Sure.
can't stay away from their private
They all seem to know
flying transportation options.
They all seem to know the Clinton family somehow. I wonder.
That's George.
That's just kidding.
To pet projects, knowing that Wells would pick up any slack that the distraction caused. After Wells' death, Eisner was lost. Katzenberg demanded that he be promoted to Wells' position, but Eisner assumed the role of president himself while he searched for a
That's
replacement.
foreshadowing.
Eisner
for
placed
later.
a lot of pressure on himself following the death of Wells. While the studios were pumping out classics, the parks were in a state of disarray. Euro
Not
Disney
for
was
this, though.
better,
Katzenberg's
but still very
starting
much a
DreamWorks.
disaster, and the opposition to the Virginia park was just beginning.
I like how they do
On May
that with the old
11th,
Civil
a
War
coalition of
type music.
historians, including David McCullough and many other prominent scholars, formed the organization Protect Historic America. Its one purpose was to stop Disney from building its Virginia theme park. Shelby Foote, a member of the organization and another historian featured in Ken Burns' Civil War docuseries, began doing newspaper and television interviews about his feelings toward the park. He argued that no one was against Disney the company, but they were against their plans. He claimed building the park so close to the Manassas battlefield would be careless, on top of the project as a whole doing little to educate the public about real history. Foote also had little confidence in general audiences, believing that, quote, people would rather go see the reenactment of Manassas than they would go to see Manassas. In other words, building a park about American history on top of historic ground was akin to building a theme park based on California in California. Another complaint made by the group was that
That's
the
a
name
bad-
Disney's
that's a
America
jab,
did not
all
let
right.
Disney
Yeah.
own the country and its history. Eisner would
That's
later
later,
consider
that's
changing the
neon.
name to Disney's American Celebration to appease critics. Hearing of the formation of Protect Historic America ahead of their announcement, Disney attempted to beat them to the punch. The company quickly donated $100,000 to the Association for the Preservation of Civil War Battle Sites, but the loud voice of the opposition overshadowed the gesture. For the first time, public opinion was shifting against Disney. Talk shows started broadcasting those that opposed Disney's America. Environmental groups began focusing on the effects the park could have on air quality, and a Senate subcommittee hearing was even scheduled to discuss the controversy. Disney was shocked by the strength and determination of the opposition, and Eisner, still recovering from the loss of Wells, was becoming increasingly unpredictable.
This reminds me of the different meanings you could give to Disneyfication.
Sure.
In New York, as Giuliani was cleaning it up, making Times Square safe for new investment that wasn't adult entertainment.
Sure.
Disneyfication just meant it did mean Disney actually doing things, but it also meant having family oriented entertainment in Midtown Manhattan. rather than the 70s when it was all adult entertainment. I don't know what caused this shift, but I guess as families were white families were, you had white flight, so they were in the suburbs.
Mhm.
So without this base of family, people who would actually go to Midtown for a night for a night out or something, it just became, well, let's just serve the adults who are here. So you get the porno theaters and other stuff.
Sure.
And bringing back family entertainment first with like Disney doing musicals, which I partook in as a child consumer. I didn't make the choice, but
Sure.
it was for my birthday. We went to see Lion King, the musical. But that's one form of Disneyfication. Just saying, like, it's family friendly, it's for all ages, and but for me, Disneyfication, like, cause like that saying, like, it's like having a New York themed amusement park in New York. Like that, it would be really stupid. But you have people, and I know this is true, you have tourists who go to New York City and they will eat at Applebee's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's what's familiar, and like they're not going to New York to actually do anything new or interesting
No.
or to experience New York. They want to experience a safe, controlled, familiar, comfortable environment.
It's a tourist experience, yeah.
And that's what Disneyfication means to me. And in some
Yeah.
way, I guess it already exists in New York, but not in a commercial fashion. There's no exhibit. There's no like touristy place where it's just New York. If you go to Coney Island and it's the real fucking Coney Island,
Yeah.
or you go to Midtown and it's an actual theater district, with real $30 sandwiches, or whatever. And
do they
that's
still
why
do- Do they still do like ferries out to Ellis Island, or is that done?
Yeah,
with
of
now?
course.
Okay,
I
mean,
assume so.
that could be something close to a completely curated experience, then, right?
True.
Because it's not a functional
there are a lot
gateway anymore.
Right, yeah, when it comes to those kind of museums where like you have a lot of mass visitors,
Mhm.
so you don't have like, it's not highbrow, it's like a middle-brow
Mhm.
museum. I guess there's different levels of museum, right? There's like a low-brow museum, which is like, it's a big train model. And there's a middle-brow, like a national park kind of style.
Sure.
And then a highbrow, which is like, a museum with descriptions where if you don't have some basic knowledge of art history, you're going to be lost. But you could also pay attention and learn art history, in real time as well. But that's why you have guides and tours of art museums, right?
True.
So I don't think that makes an art museum Disneyfied. If there's a kids center or a kids like exhibit or something, you get some of that. But yeah, I mean, museums will have gift shops and that sort of commercialization. That's.
That's
I
a
don't
little
want to say
different,
that's the same thing. That's why I say like it's not Disneyfication; it's commercialization,
Sure.
which is everywhere, and that money exists. So, but Disneyfication is like, yeah, it's the same it's the version of something that's safe, controlled, and repeatable.
Yeah.
To the point where like, yeah, like, again, you put all these different things where you could experience the real museum and the real thing in your own way, but with a tour as well. Or you could just go to Disney's America and get all of that in one place. And there's some thrill rides. And that's sort of the Disney formula, which is to do a lot of different kind of touristy stuff that you'd have to go to other, like, different places and different trips, and it's all in one trip. It's economized.
Yeah, yeah.
It's efficient.
One-stop tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that.
In the same way that if you go to Orlando and if you go for like 2 weeks, you can do the Universal parks, you can do the Disney parks, you can go to SeaWorld, you can do Medieval Times, you can do all these other things, and you can take a car to rent a car and go to the beach. Kind of stuff.
I see what you're saying. All right.
On June 21st, 1994, The Senate Public Lands and National Monuments Subcommittee held a hearing with representatives on both sides of the Disney's America debate. Reporters and the public flocked Capitol Hill, expecting nothing less than the most exciting Senate Public Lands and National Monuments Subcommittee hearing since its inception, and it did not disappoint. The hearing started out with a passionate speech by Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who argued that the entire hearing was a waste of time, and that the federal government should have no part in Disney's America, as it was clearly a state issue. He also provided his own opinion on the matter.
Nobody wants a Coney Island in their backyard, but I doubt this is in the Disney plans. And as the American Indians once found out, just because you got there first does not mean you get to make all the decisions. Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, member of the Northern Cheyenne Tribe.
Campbell then slammed a Mickey Mouse hat on the table, ending his remarks. This was only 15 minutes into the 5-hour hearing. Campbell's speech was followed by Senator Larry Craig, seemingly indifferent on Disney as a company but a staunch supporter of their right to build where the state allowed them. In a confusing, bordering on nonsensical rant, he made his case for the development of the park.
Now, if we were
He's one of
here
the zany
debating whether
Republican
Mickey would be
senators of the
wearing
time.
blue or gray as he interpreted for the
that does
visitors
sound
as his
familiar.
new theme park how the Battle of Manassas was waged, I would say that would be a worthy debate, because I don't know whether Mickey was a Confederate or whether he was a member of the Union forces. But I am willing to allow Disney the opportunity, under proper local zoning and state authority, to make a determination of whether Mickey should be wearing blue or gray. Senator Larry Craig.
Disney was off to a good
By the
start,
way,
receiving
he
support
could
from
be
both
familiar
Democratic and
because
Republican.
he was ousted or resigned, I forget which. He was one of those outwardly homophobic. I mean, they're all homophobic to some degree, but he was one of the real homophobic senators who was, I think it was in Minneapolis, or Wisconsin. He was, yeah, I believe it was, caught in a bathroom soliciting male sex. I don't know if it was a sting operation, I think, or was it just on camera. I think it was a sting operation.
Yeah, that sounds right.
It's like it wouldn't have been
If it's the
illegal
guy.
because it wasn't prostitution.
Or was it? Was that Dennis
Maybe it's
Hastert
something.
who was in Minneapolis Airport? It doesn't matter anyway.
I think it was Craig. I remember it being a Larry Craig.
Okay, well, we'll look.
Anyway, I'll look it up.
And senators. However, John Warner, a senator from Virginia, cast doubts on the long-term economic impact that the park
look
would
like
have
a-
on top of its ability to comply with federal mandates such as the recently passed Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act, or ICE-T for short. ICE-T is said multiple times throughout the hearing. Still, Warner said he would reserve his final judgment until the local, state, and federal government had completed their reviews. The following speeches from the committee and its guests were either in support or indifferent on the issue, going in Disney's favor either way. The opposition of historians waited patiently for their turn to speak, listening to senator after senator question the necessity for the hearing and putting their support behind Virginia. This was until Senator John Chafee spoke, in a passionate speech.
All right, I just looked it up. You were right. He was the one who was arrested for indecent behavior in a men's restroom at the MSP International Airport.
Arrested for well, I guess if you're gonna have sex in a bathroom, I guess that is.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I mean, it's a thing that the trans people are constantly being told that
Accused
they're
of,
gonna
yeah,
do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the senators all along. Now, he says John Chafee, but then he says Lincoln Chafee. Lincoln Chafee sounds about right because I know Senator Lincoln Chafee is a pretty progressive dude, or he was a sort of a centrist, but like in the good way, where like he takes some left wing positions that are good, and he would take some moderate positions, and he's a kind of sensible Republican senator, but like he would be really progressive in a bunch of other ways. And he ran for president as a Democrat, and he was like at the time the most progressive candidate. I think it was 04. No, maybe it was 08. Yeah,
I think 04
that was like
most progressive was Kucinich in that race.
Oh, that's true, Kucinich. Then maybe I'm thinking of 2016, but not Bernie, but Chafee was around.
Yeah. That name does ring a bell too.
Reflected the same sentiments as the concerned historians, arguing that the potential economic development of the area did not justify the destruction of historical landmarks. After his remarks, a few members of the audience began to cheer, and the chairman of the committee threatened to remove them if there were any more inappropriate reactions to the speakers. It was now time for Governor Allen to speak. Allen was well-spoken, and his overwhelming support for his people and Disney's project was impressive and persuasive.
For his people.
He also attempted to
For
cast
his
doubts on the
people.
motivation behind the project's
Loves his
opposition,
people.
suggesting that concerns
They
over
love
the
him.
loss of historical ground was a mere tactic used by wealthy Virginia landowners to halt progress.
History is not just for professional historians and professors, and it's not just
This is
for
the kind of
smug,
class
self-appointed
warfare.
arbiters.
Just pause. This is the kind of class warfare of like NIMBYism versus YIMBYism.
That's a bizarre argument, though, because wouldn't development up the land price in the area? So
This is,
I'm
of
not
course, that
following.
yeah, you can poke holes in it, Zach. But,
Yeah. it's-
but the point I want to get to is that whole like saying like you NIMBYs are actually just like your upper middle class landowners who are speaking like populists, but you're really just in it for your own property values and protecting your land, and your interests, which is a lot of anti-NIMBY rhetoric.
Sure.
It's middle class people protecting their mortgaged property, and it's property value that's quadrupled.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense if
Versus
they live there.
versus the upper class developers, and it's like it's a question of who's going to make money. But if at least if the developer makes money, at least more housing stock is built, and that's the lesser evil. As far as YIMBYs are concerned, because if NIMBYs win, it's like you get these middle class people who actually maintain their middle classhood against all odds because they have an asset that they can keep refinancing. But you have the belt of cities around the San Francisco Bay, which are all just like zero population growth and zero growth of housing units, despite there being mass transit and
Right.
trains, but being completely single-story detached houses the whole freaking way around the bay.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense because that then their property.
But
is
home
their
prices that have
investment.
gone up quadrupled, but people just aren't moving out because it's their asset.
But, yeah,
And
that makes sense. But
Yeah.
this doesn't tend to happen out in the country because
in
you
Virginia,
don't get the
yeah.
land speculators.
It's
to
not
do
the same
things.
place, not the same time either.
Right.
But it's a similar it's a similar kind of class class argument.
Yeah,
Of, like someone's making a lot of money
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
expense of the greater good.
sure, makes sense if you don't. do
And
that.
this greater good, it's Disney.
Right.
Like, don't you want Disney to be making money and creating jobs versus what? Regional farm barons or something, or whatever the hell the land's being used for.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's see if we can get to the end of this segment at least. See how much further we got to go.
Yeah, skip ahead to when they lose. No, go forward. Forward.
All right, well, we'll just.
Arbiters of culture believe it will, then we ought to be applauding George Allen.
By the time the historians were given their chance to speak, it seemed that Disney had already won the battle. First up for the historian opposition was David McCullough.
If one were to search for a surviving segment of historic America worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth keeping as it is for future generations, one could hardly do better. And by contrast, one could also hardly find a place less appropriate for a huge sprawling commercial development. David McCullough, author and historian.
Following McCullough was James McPherson, a historian and the president of Protect Historic America. While these speeches were passionate and well written, they seemed to do little to convince the senators. When questioned about what course of action they would prefer the federal government to take on the matter, the historians had no answer. The hearing concluded with Disney representatives giving their perspective on the park. Peter Rummel,
They
Mark
probably
McCullough,
did.
and the director of real estate
I'm not
development,
sure,
Dana
like,
Nottingham. Their
that seems
speeches
like a
were
biased
redundant,
take to say they had
expressing
no
the same
answer.
views
'Cause
made
I've
by
heard
many
that
of the
before,
senators and
where
experts.
it's like the activists
It was
did
clear
not
that the
have an
federal
answer
government would
for
not
what
be
they would wanna
intervening
do
on the
different.
development of Disney's
But of course
America.
they fucking
It should be noted that
We
a week
always
before,
have our
Eisner
own
had given many of the congressmen a private early screening of The Lion King. Demonstrators hearing of the premiere had shown up in
Occupied.
costume
What
with
do they
signs that
really
read,
want?
Eisner
They're
is
not
the Lion
proposing
King.
any
During these weeks in Washington, Eisner had given an aggressive interview for the Washington Post, where two defensive and ignorant quotes made their way into the headlines.
I sat through many history classes where I read some of their stuff, and I didn't learn anything. It was pretty boring. I'm shocked, because I thought we were doing good. I expected to be taken around on people's shoulders.
Disney might have won in Washington, but they were losing everywhere else.
All right, well, that's where we'll leave it tonight then, with the negotiations.
Okay.
We're just not gonna have time. We got 12
Yeah,
minutes.
sure.
I think it can be a two-parter. Give us something to start on next week.
And then we'll go into the other stuff I've collected.
For sure.
Yep. So, no, not much else to report that I can think of. I don't want to get sidetracked down some rabbit hole. But, yeah, I mentioned I'm reading. I'm going to finish the book I keep talking about. I'm going to practice music. I'm going to try to do some lit dropping.
Cool.
Because I printed a bunch of lit from the last Green Party formation, which was the regional. And I made lit, a few hundred sheets worth. And I never got to distribute it at any time. Because I basically made it for tabling, and that we kind of never did. Or we never did enough. So then that was the part of it. Like, we started tabling, but we weren't passing enough lit out. It wasn't productive. So it's like, it's sort of a catch-22. We stopped tabling, so I stopped having opportunities to distribute lit, unless I were to just go out and just hand out Green Party lit for no fucking reason. But
So it's like
a lit drop is at least a progressive neighborhood.
That's cool.
Can at least tell people we exist, and if they email the contact info on there, at least it goes somewhere.
So is it mostly just like, the planks of the party, how to get involved, that sort of thing? Or?
Yeah, on one side, it's basically like a summary of a Green Party platform. And the front is like, join the party that is you. Like, join your party. Join a party that you can actually be a part of. Doesn't take corporate money. I use like kind of 3 standard lines of what makes us different. I think there's even better versions that I've written now. So it's like I'll make a new lit for the county, which I have a draft of, but I want to run it by at least some of my peers before I start printing any of that. Which I did for this. I think I printed it without consensus about it. I just wanted to have it. So it means like I didn't give it to anybody else. I just have the stack of it. So I kind of acted unilaterally. So I may have to just act the same way to get rid of it. But I would at least like some help so it doesn't take me hours and hours to distribute it. Just an outing or two. Yeah, I don't want to think too hard. I just want to, try to enjoy my summer as well as everyone else does.
As much as you can in this heat, yeah.
Want to put a picnic together, though we have to be careful about venue. It needs to be free. It needs to be a place you can grill. Maybe we don't focus on grilling, but I want to be potluck, potluck.
Yeah. That sounds nice.
We got a month to do that, plan that up, and then plan my own vacation in September. It's a goal.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like I want it now.
Did you say you're going to Chicago? Do I remember that right?
Yeah, that's my idea, my main plan.
That's cool.
Chicago. Stay at a hostel, which would only cost $3 a night.
Wow. I didn't know it still existed.
I did a search for hostels in
Yeah.
Chicago, and there's like one right near the Loop that's just like $30. It's like,
not bad at all.
How is this possible?
Right. Probably gonna be
and they actually have single rooms too.
Single rooms even.
You don't even have to bunk with 5 other people in the room.
That's cool.
It's just a little bit more, I think, just $5 more. It didn't make any sense to me, but I think they expect young people, they expect groups.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why. I'll have to do some more research, I think, so I know what I'm getting into. But considering that I went to the one in Montreal with minimal research on what I was getting into, and it was just perfect. But it was also because that was just one night, so things were not okay. It wouldn't matter too much. But with this, I would be staying much more. So anyway, good night, Zach, and good night, everybody who's watching this. Be well, and go the real thing for your vacation. Be with the people.
Don't go to the Disney version.
Not with a facsimile of people who are also just pretending about what they want.
Absolutely.
The happiest place on
Watch
earth.
Not for the employees, that's for sure.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And that's the thing about tourism, which itself can be debated about. I
Yeah.
know that there are organizations where they're trying to form experiment with different, more ethical forms of tourism, which include like a nonprofit where, like, if there's enough people, you can form a chapter of this organization and be like a local tour guide. So if someone wants to be an ethical tourist, they can simply not lodge with you, but they can lean on you as a resource to give them a local tour, to show them where the good places to eat, and anything they need to know, not being under
That's
that.
cool. Sounds like a good program.
I'll have to look it up again. But
Yeah,
I looked
definitely.
into how to join, but it was like you need at least 10 stable members, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to get that together.
Yeah.
And this isn't that important to me. I mean, it was called Global Greeters.
Global Greeters.
Global Greeters.
Worth a look.
All
All right. Well, yeah. Looking forward to next time, finishing up Defunctland and then heading off into other topics.
Ethnicity and other things.
Sounds good.
All right.
See you next
Later,
week.
Zach.
Bye.
Later.
All right. That was Dan Platt of the Albany Greens. And I'm going to finish it up for tonight as well. Let's see. I don't think we have enough to raid in Twitch at the moment. Nope. So we will just cut it off for tonight. You know what I could do? I could at least look up a Twitch channel to shout out. So you're going to have to bear with me for a moment. And we're going to go back to Twitch. Let's see who's live right now. We don't need to have that.
Did it say I have 2 of these?
Who is on right now? Let's just do a fun one, I think. Riff Tracks. If you like Mystery Science Theater 3000,
Department of Research.
you will love Riff Tracks. So, I'm going to go ahead and recommend you all check that out. Let's see, I'm going to have to go back to dashboard so I can open up the chat and put it in there for your viewing pleasure. Check out Riff Tracks. They're a lot of fun. And that'll be it. We'll end on the shout out. And yeah, I'd like to say I will see you Sunday, but this is going to be a very busy weekend. I have my grad school class this weekend and a lot more stuff going on. So we'll see. I'd really like to get back into the Sunday swing of things, but for now, my schedule is kind of all over the place. So we'll see. I will try to do it this Sunday, but if not, I will see you a week from now, next Tuesday. All right, have a good night, everybody, and be well.